It seems like a big day. This seems like good news. And if your job was to defend freedom of the press, and it is the job of journalists to defend freedom of the press because they rely on it, you'd think you'd be pretty excited about this. Oh, but they're not excited. Instead, journalists are panicked by this development. Watch.
I think he's a jerk. I think that he's cavalier. I think there's something dangerous when the richest guy in the world controls one of the most important political social platforms in the world. I think just as a guy who ran a business, you come in business and to fire the people before you even sit down with them just shows a cavalier recklessness. He reminds me of a Bond villain. As I said, when the richest guy in the world buys a social media platform, it's just not a good equation. I think he's a dangerous fella.
It's scary when rich people own media companies, says Donnie Deutsch, who inherited a media company from his own rich father. But he doesn't mean it. There's no principle here. No one at MSNBC means it. How do you know that? Because they're not complaining about, say, MSNBC's corporate owners, its billionaire owners at Comcast. They're not upset about the fact that Jeff Bezos, probably the second richest man in the world, owns the hometown newspaper of the government, the Washington Post. The Washington Post, owned by another billionaire, just published a tweet telling users how they can crush Twitter now that Elon Musk owns it. Quote, "If you do only one thing," the Post wrote, "lock down your ad settings on Twitter. Starve them out." The Washington Post reporters are also panicked that free speech might be back on Twitter. Taylor Lorenz, one of their most famous and thoroughly ridiculous reporters, had a particularly rough night. Quote, "It's like the gates of hell opened on the site tonight," she wrote. The gates of hell. People in the media, you may have noticed, spend their entire lives online. No, the gates of hell open when we run out of diesel fuel and the airlines don't work and people freeze to death. The gates of hell don't open when people get to say what they want on social media. Sorry, get some perspective, honey. But none of them have perspective. "It is sad," responded Frank Shaw, who works at the head of communications at Microsoft. Lorenz was upset because she makes her living by defaming people and then harassing them personally. But until last night, Twitter protected her and many journalists like her from any criticism whatsoever. Here was Vijaya Gadde, who is the chief censor at Twitter, the head lawyer, explaining why Twitter bans anyone who mocks journalists, because it's dangerous to mock journalists. Watch.
We were trying to understand the context of what was going on and take action on them. Because again, I don't know, Joe, if you've ever been the target of a dogpiling event on Twitter, but it is not particularly fun when thousands of people or hundreds of people are tweeting at you and saying things. And that can be viewed as a form of harassment. It's not about the individual tweet. It is about the volume of things that are being directed at you.
I understand.
And so in that particular case, we made the judgment call, and it is a judgment call, to take down the tweets that were responding directly to these journalists that were saying, learn to code, even if they didn't have a wish of harm specifically attached to them because of what we viewed as coordinated attempt to harass them.
See how this works? So when you're a journalist, you can destroy people's lives in this country on behalf of a political party. You can totally crush them, get them fired from their jobs, attack them to the point they literally lose custody of their children, which is happening now, by the way. You can do whatever you want if you're a journalist, but if anyone criticizes you, they have to be shut down because their criticism is violence. In this case, Twitter objected to the phrase "learn to code." Now, that's a phrase specifically used to mock journalists because that's what journalists told coal miners to do when they lost their jobs. Learn to code. It's not a threat in any way. It's not violence. It's a joke. But until last night, you couldn't say it on Twitter. Of course, you could aim it downward. You could still tell coal miners to learn to code, but you couldn't tell people with power to learn to code. That's the point. When you eliminate free speech, who do you help? The people in charge. Only the powerful benefit from censorship. The editor of the Daily Caller was banned for telling the Daily Show to learn to code. So the propagandists had protection from Twitter. That's the point. And they've lost it. And blogs like The Verge are very upset. The Verge just published a profanity-laced screed that included this amazing line, quote, "Most people do not want to participate in horrible, unmoderated internet spaces. Also, everyone crying about free speech conveniently ignores that the biggest threat to free speech in America is the effing government." Okay, well, that's true, but it's also a lie by omission. Because in fact, Twitter was acting on behalf of the government. That's the point. And we know that thanks to lawsuits filed by Alex Berenson and others. We know for a fact that Twitter censored political views at the behest of the White House and also at the behest of Pfizer. So the biggest company in the world, the biggest government in the world, get together and tell less powerful people they can't talk. And that's what the media are defending right now. So obviously they don't understand the concept of freedom of speech or why it's important or why Elon Musk bought Twitter. Joe Cirincione, a, quote, NatSec expert, member on the thoroughly discredited Council on Foreign Relations, wrote this last night, for example. Quote, I now approach every tweet as if it could be my last. Ooh, the self-dramatization of these people. They're such drama queens. Democratic Party lawyer Mark Elias was hysterical as well. Quote, I am here until he kicks me off. The thing is, Mark Elias isn't going to be kicked off Twitter now. We don't want him to be, by the way. We think everyone should be able to speak, period, because that's the basis of a free country. When you don't have that, you have totalitarianism, and only people who are benefiting from it support it. The whole point of the transaction is to make certain that everyone can talk. That's why Elon Musk did this. The point is to stop censoring all people, period. As the popular account Comfortably Smug put it, quote, we're celebrating because we're free to say what we want. That's what they took from us, and that's why they're terrified now. Exactly. So the people who've always been able to say whatever they want are upset, not because their right to speech is under threat, because you now have the right to speech. And they hate that, because now it's more of a fair fight.